Let's get back to our apropos feature and get more about the case of Manahel Al-Otaibi in Saudi Arabia, sentenced to 11 years in jail, basically for the clothes she wore and for her support of human rights. We have Bisant Faki of Amnesty International, who is standing by now. Bisant, let's try again with our interview. You were explaining the situation and why this is such a difficult situation for, obviously, Manahel, who is in jail for something that would just go unnoticed in a democratic country, but also there are many other women as well who are in similar situations. Give us your take on the whole situation right now.
Thank you so much, Mark, and I hope you can hear me now. And I just want to say thank you once again for covering Manahel's case. It was a very devastating blow this week when we found out that she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Manahel Al-Otaibi has been detained since 16 November 2022, so she spent almost a year and a half behind bars. And now she was sentenced in January in a secret trial by a counterterrorism court to 11 years. And we've only just found out this horrific news because some UN special rapporteur sent us an official UN communication to the Saudi government, and the Saudi government responded saying that they had sentenced her. 2 weeks ago, we found out. So Manahel had been forcibly disappeared for 5 months. Her family didn't know where she was. We didn't know where she was. On the 14th of April, she called her family and she told them that she was being held in solitary confinement, that she was being beaten, and that her leg was broken. So we were already so distressed to hear this news. And then, a couple of weeks later, we find out that she's been sentenced to 11 years in prison. Amnesty International was unable to review the documents from this trial. It's a secret trial, as I've said, but we have reviewed court documents from previous trials, and we know what her charges are. It is going to the mall without wearing a abaya, but also tweeting about women's rights. So tweeting the hashtag end male guardianship, and that's why she's being, imprisoned for terrorist offenses. These are her crimes. This is absolutely absurd. And now, the only thing we can do is raise our voices for Manahel and demand that Saudi authorities release her.
We've covered the case in depth of Lujain Al-Hathul, who was jailed for basically campaigning for women's rights, in particular the right to drive. I mean, in a normal society, one thinks this is absolutely crazy, but that was the situation, that women couldn't go out and drive. And as you're saying, this idea of male guardianship is something else as well. The Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, is talked about as someone who is in the process of reforming Saudi society. But clearly that isn't going very far.
It's so interesting that you've brought up Lujain Al-Hathloul's case, because I was actually just with her sister Lina. One thing that we need to note is that, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman granted women the right to drive, but he also is now keeping Lujain under travel ban. The women that campaigned for the right to drive, that campaigned for their rights, they were detained, they were sexually assaulted, and given very long sentences. Now, we know that the public outcry for cases like Manahel helped, for cases like Lujain and the women human rights defender helped eventually lead to their release. So that's why everyone must really engage with Manahel's case. But really, when Mohammed bin Salman, when the Crown Prince talks about reforms, he basically believes that rights are his to give, and he will prosecute people who demand their rights. The Specialized Criminal Court, the anti-terrorism court that sentenced Manahel to 11 years in prison, it's locked up lawyers, it's locked up activists. It has sentenced to death a man named Mohammed Al-Ghamdi because he posted some tweets critical of the Saudi authorities to Twitter accounts that have less than 10 followers. So what are these reforms that the Crown Prince speaks of?
Talking about, I'll list them just so people know at home or wherever they're watching. Curtailing the influence of the Wahhabi religious establishment, restricting the powers of religious police, improving women's rights. Well, I think you've actually knocked that one down completely with what we're talking about right now. Removal of the ban on female drivers and weakening the male guardianship system in 2019. Now, this is a list of things that are claimed to have been done, but what is the reality that women are facing today in Saudi Arabia? Given Manahel's case, clearly it is a very bleak reality.
Yes, absolutely. Saudi Arabian society has changed. This is without a doubt. But at the same time, people are living in fear. So Saudi Arabia changes when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman decides that something gets to be changed. However, when people actually demand their rights, it's not true. It's not permitted. And what we're seeing is that Saudi Arabia is spending billions of dollars to clean up its reputation. So they're flying in athletes, they're flying in entertainers. The World Tennis Association, the Women's Tennis Association will be playing a final in Saudi Arabia this year. But at the same time, Amnesty International has documented the human right, a deterioration in the human rights situation. I think Manahel's case is emblematic of that. Saudi Arabia remains one of the biggest executors in the world. So I think, we can talk about reforms, we can talk about but what we really need to be cognizant of is the reality on the ground. I'll say one last thing, which is that the Crown Prince pledged a series of legal reforms that were meant to improve women's rights, for example. But the personal status law that was passed on Women's Day was a couple last year. We've analyzed it, and actually we found that it codifies discrimination against women and really affects their rights when it comes to marriage and custody and divorce, and really entrenches the male guardianship system. So I would ask that people be cognizant of what the reality is on the ground for Saudi women.
Bisan, thank you very much indeed for giving us more on the case of Manahel Al-Otaibi. We will be watching for developments and, of course, hopefully speaking to you in the future when there are positive developments on that. Bisan Faki of Amnesty International, thank you for joining us here for this apropos feature. Bisan, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to you all for watching too.